atu I te rangi, kia taputo ingoa, kia tai
I remember an
mai
old
tō
Maori lady too just standing at the back of the boat and singing. This wonderful noise of a lady singing Maori, and all the wind and rain whipping it around. It was astonishing.
Ko mai kia mātou aia nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā, murua o mātou hara.
Many of the tragedies that day had been on the same lifeboat as Alma, the starboard or S1 lifeboat.
The officer in charge of that, I don't know why, but he decided to head out into the Cook Strait again and got swamped south of where the Waihingi had sunk.
So why did they go the wrong way, back out to sea, when they'd been so close to the beach at Seatoun? Crew member Frank Hitchens says they had no choice.
Got the engine started on that and then took off to try and start picking up any survivors in the water. But very soon after that it got either swamped by a wave or they didn't put the plug in, I'm not too sure which, but it got full of water anyway.
Swamped and sinking, an attempt to rescue them was wrecked by another huge wave.
I looked across and the mist kind of cleared a weeny bit and I saw this other lifeboat and the tug coming towards it. And as I looked, the tug came up on a wave and the lifeboat was there and the tug came right down on the lifeboat.
And the lifeboat turned upside down, throwing everybody into the water.
I'll never forget hearing those screams either. You could, just coming at you across the sea.
It was chaos. There were people around everywhere, the boats were trying to get away.
2 lifeboats did make it to Seatoun. The emergency services and locals rushed here to help, but the strong current and winds were carrying passengers across to the dangerous eastern shore.
We went around one bay, 2 bays, and we thought, oh, nothing much here, nothing much is happening here. And then as we got around another bay, which is probably about 3 kilometres away from the gate around where we'd walked, I saw an orange life raft, and it was upturned on the edge of the rocks.
And I just floated, and I thought, just lying there floating and thinking, oh, waves were high, and I'm thinking, oh well, if the sharks in the harbour too bad, I'm not very worried, I've lost my kids, so, that was it.
When we saw the life raft, I thought, oh my God, this is something serious. This is bigger than what we thought. We thought, this is really something that happened.
Hundreds of passengers were now in the freezing seas, rescue vessels and locals working frantically to reach them.
I think the tug picked up 120 people out of the water.
Then we were confronted, I remember, by people in orange life vest walking towards us. And they were no shoes, they were wet, cold, shaking, and they're saying, well, thank God you come to help us. But we didn't know. We had no idea how we could help them.
We decided that we would go right out. We went straight out and we could see 2 people way in the distance, and we thought we'll get the furthest ones out we could see, so we thought we'll get them.
All of a sudden the boys came along in a lifeboat, mine a lifeboat. And
Now we picked Shirley up first.
We started to see people in the surf, and out beyond the rocks. They were out there bobbing around in the surf in their life jackets.
By this stage we could hear on our car radio that the Waihinei was in difficulty at Seatoun, at the entrance to the harbour, so I thought I'd go out there see if there was anything I could do.
The storm and the demand on the emergency communications proved too much. They were flooded and crashed. But one man managed to help keep them in contact.
I had my radio equipment with me in my car, and a policeman was trying to use his radio, but it wouldn't work. And I said to him, I've got communications with amateur radio, can it be any help? He said they wanted ambulances.
On the other side of the harbour, though, there was no sign of help for Jim.
I remember trying to grab people to pull them out, and we got hold of one or two and pulled them up onto the beach, and we'd pull them up, and we had to take them a good 10 metres up the beach, otherwise the waves would come in and catch them and suck them back out again.
As Jim tried to reach passengers from the rocks, out in the open sea, Ray was trying to rescue Shirley.
He was held on to me and I said, just let me go, you know, I don't want to go on anymore. And they said, no, we're in the boat, we'll be quite safe. And the next thing, a wave caught us.
The boat went straight up the curve of the wave, and over she went. Everybody fell out into the water, and the boat coming down didn't hit anybody, thank goodness.
I remember trying to make my way between some rocks. There's a little bit of beach between these rocks, and I was trying to make my way between them.
One shocking incident that really struck me was this old lady. She was probably about 60 years of age, and she was bobbing around out beyond the rocks, and I went out between two rocks to try to get her. I got her by the arm, and I'm holding her and pulling her in, but the force of the sea when it went back was too strong. I couldn't hold her, and it sucked her out of my arm.
And I remember getting ducked by the big breakers a couple of times, and then the last big breaker came along, and I just remember being ducked totally, and everything went dark and quiet, and that's the last thing I remembered.
She was sucked back out to sea, and the next thing, on the next wave she came in, and I can see it now, I can see it as clear as it was yesterday, her crashing on the rock, and her head and her shoulder, they just smashed on the rock. And then I saw the blood, and I thought, well, that's, what could you do, you know? And yeah, excuse me. It's as clear as it was yesterday. And I thought, man, that could have been my mother. And that's how it affected me.
Within an hour of the call to abandon ship, all passengers had left Waihinei alive. Captain Robertson the last to leave. But many had yet to make it ashore safely, with hundreds blown across to the desolate rocky coast.
Their clothes were stripped off them. The women were in there just panties and bras, old ladies. They had no shoes, they had big grazes down their legs. Their arms were shredded on the rocks, and there were others being washed up onto the beach, and it was just horrific.
And Ray, trying to save Shirley's life, was also now trying to save his own.
We all were clinging to the upturned lifeboat, and we were being washed out further and further out towards Pencarrow Lighthouse.
We were all on the underneath of the lifeboat. It was turned upside down and we were lying across it.
Out of the blue appeared a trawler, and it turned out I think it was a new fish.
It took a hell of a long time to get us up into there. They had a heck of a job getting me into there because we had to go up this tiny thin rope.
We were just pulling them back up onto the beach, and I remembered trying to make a fire on the beach, and I tried to get this fire going with these old bits of wood and stuff, and to try and give some warmth to the people that had come out. And it was a pretty futile attempt. It didn't really do much, but the people, at least, they sat there. All we could say to them was, look, help's coming, you know, and not that we at that stage didn't even know any help was coming.
More crafts came out, fishing boats came out, you know, it was...
They were the real heroes.
Craft of every description are heading out and have been heading out for the past quarter hour from Worcester Bay. There have been surf life-saving boats from the surf club along here, dinghies, launches, motorboats. A whole truckload of inflatable life rafts came through 10 minutes ago. They've all gone out to help.
When the tug pulled up to the jetty, as I went to get off to get into the bus, the sea actually washed up over the jetty. It was so rough, and that's when I screamed the first time. You know, it made you realise what we had survived, you know, what we'd been through. So it was a terrible day.
I wasn't in a lifeboat. Maybe I was lucky not to be in one, because I might have ended up in my sister's.
6 years old, David was also carried across to the eastern coast. He'd survived by clinging to a piece of wood until he too was unconscious.
I was sitting on the rocks with no clothes on, very cold.
I had a cop, I think it was, taking me through, and he said, just let her through, she's lost her children.
We're putting them up onto the beach, and but some of them, when they came in, they were so frightened, they just kept going. They just went up the beach and they started climbing up through the gorse bushes at the back on the side of the hill. They just to escape the waves, and they were in a state of shock.
And I was sitting down there, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and his radios were on down there, and they'd said that they'd found the body of a little girl over Pencarrow Rock. And just as I was walking out, I said to him, I said, that's my girl.
And we did what we could to save as many as we could, but we were pulling them out, they were dead. You know, many were dead. We were just pulling bodies, dragging the bodies up the beach and laying them on the shingle and just leaving them there. And I can still see it today, it's clear as, you know, these bodies, young ones, man, woman, just laying there with their clothes, their legs stripped bare, and it was a horrific sight, it really was.
Bodies from the Wahine have been brought to shore at many points around the harbour. Bodies have been recovered from the eastern beaches from Pencarrow to Eastbourne.
This is me sitting or lying on the back of a truck here, with my feet hanging over the back there, and I believe that some of the people on there could have been dead.
Crewman Frank Hitchens was so cold and lifeless, it was thought he too had died. This Land Rover, the first chilling signal to the emergency services of the catastrophe unfolding on the eastern shore. Jan Willis was a nurse on duty that day.
He had been further around to the end of the Eastbourne Road, where the beach gets quite rocky on the way to Pencarrow. And he had a Land Rover and he said,